Thank you. The meeting of the Committee of the Whole Planning Administration is now called to order. I would like to ask you to rise if you're able for the reading of the invocation, please. As we come together today, we recognize the great responsibilities laid upon us. Our council will always strive to understand the needs of the people we serve and to use power wisely and well. Our purpose is to establish and maintain a city of prosperity and righteousness where freedom prevails and where justice rules. Let us also not forget those who served our community and who are no longer with us so that we can continue to do the work we must in their memory. Please be seated. Clerk, has the roll call been taken?
Yes, roll call has been taken.
Thank you. Members of the committee, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest or on tonight's agenda? Seeing none. Members of the committee, are there any items of consideration for consent you would like to separate for discussions tonight? Seeing none. Oh, Mayor Davis.
I have three.
Okay,
7.1.1, the background information and cultural hub. 7.1.2, fire incident, 321 Henry Street. 7.1.3, notice of motion deadline.
Mayor Davis. Is there any other items that the committee wishes to separate? Seeing none. Councilor Martin, can you please move the motion to approve all items for consideration consent 7.1 and 2, not separate for discussion this evening, and name your seconder?
Thank you. I move, seconded by Councilor McCurry, that all items for consideration and consent, items 7.1 and 7.2, not separated for discussion purposes, be approved.
I'll call the vote on those items that have been separated first. That have not been called separated. Him. Read the title of the ones that are subject to the vote.
Thank you. All those items that are subject to the vote are item 7.1.4, lane closing and conveyance, Sanders Street, item 7.1.5, committee review task force report, and item 7.2.1, the minutes.
Thank you. There are no statutory public hearings tonight. There are no delegations. We will now consider the items that were separated for a vote. Mr. Davis, Mayor Davis, you have 7.11. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll start off with some questions for staff, in particular through you to Sarah Monroe. See, Sarah is here in the council chambers. So, Sarah, this is the purpose of this resolution is to give staff the authority to proceed with further discussions with Laurier regarding setting up a mid-sized performance hub in what was Market Square in the area of the old cinemas. What in particular is, what is the feasibility plan say can be done with those cinemas to make them suitable for live performances?
Sarah Monroe, Director of Economic Development, Tourism and Cultural Initiatives. Through the chair to Mayor Davis, there are several plans for this space in order to make it a community-facing space in what is perceived as about a half educational facing space and half community. So they will be looking to consolidate 2 of the 3 theaters into a performing arts space that would have uses from dance to small speaker series. And then one of the former theater spaces would be redeveloped in partnership with Princess Cinemas to be an actual theater space in the downtown core. So individuals from the community and students could attend movies in that space. This space also includes concession areas as well as dressing rooms, which are essential for dance competitions. And it is meant to be kind of a launching off space for smaller performing arts organizations to build their audiences in order to eventually be able to have the capacity to move into larger performing arts spaces like the Sanderson Center.
All right, and what is the estimated total cost of the rebuild or repurposing the cinemas approximately? And how would the city participate and finance if it decides to become a partner in this proposal?
Wilfrid Laurier University has not yet submitted their formal ask. However, they have let us know that the full project cost for this phase to develop this space with construction is about $12.7 million for the full project. They would ideally then be asking for 50% or 6.35 million over 10 years or so. That formal ask again hasn't been sent, but would be presented to council next month. But this is what we know at this time. At this time, they're not asking for any operating dollars.
And how would we finance that?
Through the chair to Mayor Davis, Joelle Daniels, Commissioner of Corporate Services and City Treasurer. Currently, we are funding through our casino revenues contribution to the joint Laurier Y project. So it's anticipated that when that funding ends, that funding would then be replaced with a 10-year annual commitment to this Laurier project.
Thank you. And in terms of how much time the city or its partners will be able to use the facility and what the rental rates might be, has that been worked out or would that be to be determined?
Those costs would be to be determined. We have had some preliminary conversations with Laurier, as well as some of the performing arts organizations that are concerned about these costs, especially as they start to do their own audience development. So we have looked into some options to possibly rejig one of our existing grant programs to help fund to offset the costs of those rentals.
Mr. Chair, I think I'm just running out of my time, so I would like to speak to this as opposed to just asking questions. So if you put me in the speaking order, please.
I will do so. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And next I have Councilor McCurry and then Councilor Slass. Councilor McCurry, you have the floor, sir.
Chair, thank you. And through you to staff. Sarah, there's quite a lovely mural in that space. Can you confirm that that's going to be retained by Laurier?
Through the chair to Councillor McCreary, the most recent architectural drawings that I have seen do include that mural, and the mural is in very good shape right now. It's being protected.
And how would you describe that mural?
The mural is very large. It encompasses all of the space across from the concessions, which are remaining as they are, and it interprets the history of Brantford visually.
Do you have any idea who the artist was?
I will have to get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McCurry. Councilor Slass, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Sarah. Sarah, do we know the seating capacity in the performing area?
Through the chair to Councillor Sless, we're looking at around 250 to 300 seats.
Okay. Is there going to be storage space for the community groups that will be to store their sets and costumes and that type of thing?
At this time, Wilfrid Laurier University is not proposing there to be permanent storage space for uses such as set design or set storage. However, they have offered to work with the organizations that need that space to find alternate spaces, potentially in the One Market building or in any other facilities owned by Laurier.
Okay, fine. And then just finally, so the city, it appears, will be picking up half the tab on this. So I would presume that the user groups which we represent would be involved in the consultation process on things they would like to see and not like to see, and how they would like to see it. Is that conversation going to take place? Is that part of the package?
Wilfrid Laurier University has been doing quite a bit of consultation since 2019, and the Brant Performing Arts Network has been included in those, as well as a lot of the dance users, and all of those consultation individuals will be listed in the report that comes forward next month.
Okay, so just to be clear, then the community groups will help shape this project.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Slass. And before we move on to second time speakers, Councilor Van Tibber, can I ask you to please place the three items for consideration and consent that were separated on the floor and state your seconder, please?
My seconder is Councillor Samwell, and move the three items that were placed on the floor for discussion.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, you want a second time speaking opportunity? Yes, you have it now, sir.
Thank you very much. So The history on this initiative begins actually 2 councils ago. I believe it was 2015. The task force, as you know, Councilor Carpenter, Chair Carpenter, was struck to look at the feasibility of the city having in place a small, mid-sized performing arts center. The reason for it is because, of course, our Sanderson Center, as beautiful as it is very large and isn't well suited to deal with events that are in that 150, 200, 300 audience range. And in fact, it's too large and too expensive for groups to rent. As a result, we have a number of cultural and artistic groups in town that really don't have a proper facility to truly demonstrate what it is they're doing and for putting on live performances. So I think everyone acknowledged, and that was the last council acknowledged it as well, that there was a need to try and find a solution to this problem, because it could be an important part of encouraging the development of culture in our community, which is, I think, an important thing to do. But we concluded, the task force, about 3 years ago, that for the city to do this as a standalone new center, it would be, and this would be pre-COVID prices, a capital cost to build of about 45 to 50 million. Now would be much more than that. And operating costs of anywhere between, I think it was 600 to 700,000. And so we were struggling, realizing, given the demands on the city in terms of infrastructure, potential new hospital, that it would not be feasible for the city to do that. And so Laurier stepped forward to offer this as a proposal. We've done various feasibility studies, and I think this provides us with a great opportunity, Mr. Chair, to have in place a small, mid-sized performing arts center in our downtown that will assist in the rejuvenation of our downtown and also assist various arts groups, arts and cultural groups. It'd be nice tonight to know what those rates might be, storage base, all these other issues. But what we have before us, Mr. Chair, is this is really the first step. And that is, do we, as a council, do we support this in principle and give staff the authority to now go forward and negotiate the actual terms, specific terms with Laurier, and that'll come to us if we approve it tonight, sometime probably in the fall. So I can certainly endorse this, and I thank staff for this. Has been a 6-year, no, it's been like an 8-year effort, and it would be great to see this come to a conclusion, and that to do so in association partnership with Laurier. So I'm quite happy to support this tonight in principle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Caputo, first time.
Thank you, Chair. Through you too, Sarah. So I'm in agreement with Mayor Davis on this, that we do have a need for smaller venues for a lot of the situations that we have from cultural arts and different things that could be done across the city. I guess I'm going to go ask 2 questions. A, do we have a deadline date as to when this would be actually open and ready to go? And B, what plans do we actually have moving forward with the Sanderson Center to kind of get better fill rates and better shows and more venues happening in that area? Now that we have hockey come in, we could have the Sanderson Center, and all those things will all kind of blend together. Thanks.
Through the chair to Councillor Caputo, can you please repeat the first question?
Absolutely. Do we have a date as to completion?
Thank you. Laurier, in their next proposal, they are projecting about 2 years from start of construction to be able to open the space. They were hoping to be able to open in 2024, but they are a little bit behind schedule. So this funding, if secured at the time of the ask, ideally next month, would allow them to start construction and then hopefully complete in 2 years. The second question related to the Sanderson Center, we're working with Laurier again on a project through their community hub to look at bringing diverse audiences to the Sanderson Center. And that sometimes means diverse audiences related to how they respond to marketing that we're currently doing, and if what we're doing is effective, but also if the programming that we're offering is effective. So we're working with Laurier students right now to do some research and also partner with Laurier students to be able to offer some programming that's geared towards that specific audience.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Caputo. Any further questions? Seeing none? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Waiting for Caputo Hunt. Maybe you could just give us a thumbs up. Thumbs up. 2 thumbs up.
Thank you. Item 7.1.1, background information on Cultural Hub at One Market, carried unanimously on a recorded vote of 10-0. All those voting in favor are Councilors Sullivan, Sless, Martin, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, Samwell, Hunt, McCreary, Caputo, and Mayor Davis.
Thank you. Moving on to 7.1.2, the fire incident at 321 Henry Street. And Mr. Mayor, you asked for that to separate, and you actually brought the resolution forward in the first place. You have the floor, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councilor Carpenter, Chair Carpenter. This incident, and it was the second fire incident at this location in the last, I think, 4 or 5 years, of a major concern, I think, to all of us, but in particular, myself and the Ward 4 councilors, Councilor Carpenter and Councilor Hunt, because that's where the fire was. I think we can all agree that we never want to see another fire like that again in our community. And so that is the reason why I brought this resolution forward, so that we could obtain further information regarding how the fire started, what circumstances exacerbated the situation, and what's being done and will continue to be done to prevent this from happening again. So I've got some questions, if you don't mind, Chair Carpenter, for our fire department, our excellent fire department staff. The chief is here with deputy. So, quick question. How did this fire happen for a second time? This type of fire?
Through the chair, Fire Chief Todd Binkley. The fire is a result of a critical temperature check that was missed during the manufacturing of the mats. This allowed the product to move to general storage, where it continued to heat till it reached its self-ignition temperature, and the fire started.
How was it missed?
Through the chair, human error.
Did they have any monitoring systems in place that would not rely on staff, but in fact would do the monitoring, let's say, automatically through AI and computer software?
Through the chair, the company had installed some technology to monitor the yard, including infrared technology, but it wasn't fully operational at the time of the fire.
And so since the fire, this report was commissioned, and certain steps have been taken to reduce the possibility of this happening again. What in particular has been done both by our great fire department staff, any other government officials, and of course, the company and their staff and employees?
Through the chair, our fire prevention division has worked with the company to implement a number of factors to help mitigate the risk of another fire starting, including the company has bolstered its internal process for monitoring the product. They've installed technology, including video and infrared technology with alarm monitoring for the product out in the storage yard. We've limited the amount of storage they can store in the yard. We've increased the clearances to the building to pile separations, including increased the clearances between their quarantine and their general storage. As well as we've implemented all this into an approved fire safety plan. So what that means is they now have a document that says they have to continue to keep all these clearances, keep all these minimum storage. If not, they can be charged under the Ontario Fire Code.
And Chief, how will we ensure that these measures remain in place and that the appropriate steps are taken and continue to be taken to prevent this from happening again?
Through the chair, our fire prevention division will continue to inspect this property as per our council approved fire inspection schedule.
Is there anything else that our professional fire prevention staff believe needs to be done to further protect our community?
Through the chair, as I stated, I think the fire prevention division has worked hard to mitigate the risk of another fire starting of a similar nature, similar cause.
One last question. So some communities try to address this through, let's say, change in their zoning bylaws to limit the areas within which businesses like this that have this type of production process, limiting where they can be located. And you can, of course, zone out of existence the current business. Is that an option that the city could consider, might consider? Is it an option or not?
Through the chair, I'll yield that question to legal.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Sorry. Michael Bradley, Commissioner of Community Development. We did discuss this afternoon with legal. The use of a zoning bylaw as a prohibitive tool is risky for council. It can be done. The zoning bylaw has a section called uses prohibited in all zones, and it's something we could explore in that area or under a specific zoning. So it's something we'll probably take away and come back to council with.
All right. So would it be possible to provide us with a memo or letter of confidential legal opinion prior to the council meeting in 2 weeks?
Through you, Mr. Chair, certainly we can do that.
All right. Well, I'm hoping that can be done then. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Sless, you have the floor. You're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the chief. Chief, when there's a fire like that, there's an investigation done. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct. There was an investigation in origin and cause conducted by both our fire prevention or in conjunction with our fire prevention division and the Ontario Fire Marshal.
Okay. No, I believe you said earlier that you determined it was human error. Were there other factors that contributed to this? Was there any negligence or safety equipment not present that should be present that helped contribute to this fire?
Through the chair, the origin and cause was, as I said, it was determined to be of human error. They missed the temperature check that allowed the product to continue to superheat and was moved to their general storage yard instead of quarantine.
Okay, so that was the sum total of the problem that created the fire. Like there were no safety mechanisms that were missing in the facility that helped contribute to this?
Through the chair, none that were required by legislation.
Okay, I guess where I was going, there's no ability for the city to fight something like this. Is very, very expensive from the city's perspective. And if there's negligence or anything involved, I would presume that would open an avenue to recoup some of the cost or all of the cost for containing and controlling that fire. I guess none of that is available to us. Is that correct?
Through the chair, not specifically for neglect, but the company is invoiced through the city for charges under our current approved fees and charges bylaw.
Okay, so there is an ability to recover some of the cost of fighting this type of fire.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sless. Any further comments, Councillor Caputo?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Chief Binkley. Thanks for being here tonight. So I noticed here that we did have financial implications of $666,000. Did that include any fines? Could there have been fines laid out? Like I noticed that there's fees and charges. Just wondering whether that number was accumulated for what we used as expenses to recuperate back, or was it something that they had an added fine to them? Or can we do that kind of thing?
Through the chairs, the financial implications are reflective of the charges that were billed under the fees and charges bylaw. However, they also pled guilty and were charged $10,000 by the court, as well as a victim surcharge for a total of about $12,505, if I remember the report correctly.
Yeah, it's written here as 22.5. I just thought that was from a court. It was something that maybe we could have actually imposed an additional fine. I just wasn't sure if there's a bylaw or if there's a legal implication that would allow us not to.
Through the chair, we process our charges through the court system.
I think Council Caputo. Okay, thank you. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, to Chief Binkley. Thank you for the report. Very well done. The biggest concern that we heard from the surrounding businesses was the environmental impact, specifically the runoff. So when I'm reading your report under 9.1.2, it indicates that the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks brought in a pumper truck to pump out the drainage water, which was running into the drainage channel. Is that a cost that it's up to the ministry to charge that back, or is that something that gets charged to us?
Through the chair, I believe Selvi will answer that question.
Thank you.
Through the chair, Selvi Congera, Director Environmental Services. The pump out charges, it's actually the city retained a contractor, and Northwest Rubber agreed to assume that charges, and they managed that contractor, but pretty much we looked after to make sure the water was directed to either the storm pond or it's directed to wastewater plant, so it didn't go to a creek or Grand River and affect the environment. So the costs were paid by Northwest Rubber for that contractor to pump out.
Thank you, Selby. And then I guess the other question along the lines of fees and charges. So if I understand correctly, Northwest Rubber, on top of being fined $10,000, paid a $2,505 victim surcharge, and then we're charged back the $666,000 from the city.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Councillor Sullivan, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Chief Binkley, have there been any comparatives done to the prior fire? Like, I know you've done the investigation, but were there any similarities between the two fires that we should have caught the first time?
Through the chair, to answer the councillor's question, the fire was, the cause of the fire is very similar in nature. And after a result of the first fire, processes were put in place by the company, including this temperature check and the quarantine of product that was overheating. Again, it was just missed as a human error this time.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Martin, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, excellent report. I was reading through it and I was wondering to myself, I wonder if foam would have helped. And then I got to the point in the report where it talked about foam. So the $666,000, does that allow you to replace all the foam that other departments contributed to this cost?
Through the chair, yes, that was part of our the fees and charges.
Okay. Well, thank everybody involved for doing a great job.
Yes. Councilman McCurry, first time speaker.
Sure, thank you, through you. Chief, the labor costs you incurred or that you've itemized with respect to the $600,000 cost, are those overtime dollars, or do they include the guys who were working the regular shift on the fire as well?
The fees and charges don't specify the recouping of overtime charges, but charges that we do account for man hours within the charges we charge for the different responses.
So the $666,000 includes all the firefighter labor that went into the fire.
Through the chair, yes, it would be included in the
So
charges.
that would include the guys that were on duty that weren't called in on overtime or called in like a second call.
Through the chair, what's approved by council to charge is a set rate of the that's billed out set by the MTO. And that rate would include labor costs for the people that are arriving on the truck, while they're on duty.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McCurry. Second time speaker is Mayor Davis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I don't mind deferring to you if you want to take a speaking opportunity, but before I speak a second time.
I will. Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the mayor for bringing this forward. It was a very contentious issue with this fire, second time. They also own another company that we've had some issues with fire, but you've also made changes in the storage and the quality of storage and how storage is handled as well as part of the going forward safety program, have you not?
Through the chair, that's correct. We've limited their amount of exterior storage. We've increased distances between clearances and piles, clearances and quarantine, clearances to the building.
And did we have any injuries?
Through the chair, we did not receive any injuries during the fighting of this fire.
Oh, and thank everyone for keeping the neighborhood safe and the community safe. Mr. Mayor, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first, I want to thank our fire department, for the excellent work they did in bringing this fire under control. And it was done, I guess, because you had some practice. It was done, I think, a little more quickly than the first time around. And I also want to thank the crews that came out from the County of Brant and Six Nations to assist in extinguishing the fire. I don't think we had crews from any other department, did we?
Through the chair, we had crews from Brant County Fire, Six Nations Fire, but as well London Fire brought the foam trailer. So there was a crew of individuals that brought down there, as well as Hamilton Fire had an on-duty staff that brought foam from Hamilton Fire, as well as Norfolk Fire brought foam as well.
Great. So I wanted to thank all of the crews involved in all the departments for helping us in bringing the fire under control prior to it causing any serious damage to the surrounding residents or businesses. I suspect I can say that this council is united in not wanting to see a fire like this happen again in our community. I have confidence in our department staff and the fire inspection staff and working with provincial authorities that we have now in place the measures that will make another fire extremely unlikely. I have a lot of confidence in our fire department staff and other city staff. But I'd also say this to the company. I'm sure the company would like to be seen as a good corporate citizen. And I think I would say to them that perhaps it may be useful for them to speak to our community as well, either delegating when this comes to council, so we can hear direct from the company what it intends to do to make sure that this doesn't happen again. I think that would inspire a greater degree of confidence in the community. And I'd ask, they don't have to do it. They're not required or under any obligation. But I'm going to ask that I think that would be helpful for them and for our community. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Merriman. Staff will make sure that the company receives that invitation. Seeing no further speakers, I'm going to call the question.
Thank you. Item 7.1.2, fire incident, carried unanimously on a recorded vote of 10-0. All those voting in favor are Councilors Sullivan, Sless, Martin, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, Samwell, Hunt, McCurry, Caputo, and Mayor Davis.
Thank you. And that brings us to our third and final item before we go to resolutions. And that's the notice of motion deadline update. And I think Mayor Davis, you asked for that to be separated. You have the floor, sir.
Yeah, I did. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was one of several councilors that asked staff to take a look at this because we've had a very high volume of notices of motion. And those are resolutions that come from county council members. And, certainly it's an excellent initiative. Councillors, individual ward councillors, they can move forward with initiatives that are important to them or their ward. And I wouldn't want us to see in any way restrict the ability of councillors to do this. However, I've grown concerned about the number and volume of these kinds of resolutions we have and how that impacts staff, because staff, of course, have work to do lists, and they try and achieve certain objectives through the year based on the priorities and strategies we set out for them. And of course, we have a budget that determines how much resources they can allocate. And these notices of motion, if they're very, very frequent and numerous, they can distort what it is staff are doing and divert them from dealing with other issues that we've asked them to deal with either through our budget or our strategy setting session. And so I think we've got to strike a good balance between doing the two, allowing councillors to have the ability to bring forward initiatives, but at the same time, not unduly disrupt the work plan for the city in accordance with the budget and also the strategies that we set out at the beginning of this council. So what we have before us then is a proposal from staff, and I've got a question for our city clerk. How do we compare in terms of the number of notices of motion or resolutions compared to the municipalities that responded?
Through the chair, Chris Gauthier, City Clerk, Director of Clerk Services. So attached to the report in Appendix B, we developed a jurisdictional scan of other municipalities that have notice of motion in their processes. So the only other really comparable municipality is the City of Cambridge. They receive a similar amount to us as well. However, they are also looking to their processes and how to improve those efficiencies as well.
And do staff, I'm not sure whether you would answer this question through you, Mr. Chair, whether it's the city clerk or the city CAO. Does staff have any concern about the volume and number of resolutions that it's not just this council, it was the prior council that was doing it as well?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the report, different councils do things differently. Some councils report ask staff to do notice of motions like ours. A lot of councils ask staff to bring back reports. But it's well laid out in the report. There's a diagram. Many people don't realize that right now we're in the middle of doing our planning for next year and all our work plans as well. We're delivering. So a person in our ops department like Mark Jacklin is actually doing his budget at the moment while he's actually paving and fixing roads. So when NOMs come in next year, mid-year, it changes all those plans. And so I think I've answered your question. I've lost my train of thought there. So sorry. Oh, workload. Yes. So the NOMs do add a tremendous amount of work, not just writing them, but changing all those directions. You have staff who have certain directions, but it does create a fair bit of workload if it's not in the current work plans.
Right. And there can be good reasons for doing resolutions outside of the normal time period, something that's urgent or not anticipated. As I said, I'd hate to see us anyway try and limit that. But again, the goal is to strike a right balance. So, Mr. Clerk, how are we doing that? What changes are being suggested that will try and get us to the point where we have a better balance between the two competing interests?
So through the chair to Mayor Davis's question, during our research with other municipalities, we came across Burlington. Burlington has standards in terms of their notice of motions, meaning good governance standards. So the first change that we're suggesting is that all notice of motion coincide with good governance principles in terms of adhering to policies, policy instruments, legislation, council priorities, strategic vision of the municipality. Second, we have implemented, once a notice of motion is introduced as a resolution, upon approval of the committee and upon approval of council, that resolution gets brought forward to the estimates process. There is a provision in the procedural bylaw that allows a member with a seconder during the introduction of the resolution to deem the item urgent as defined within the procedural bylaw. And that would require 2/3 vote to consider that matter outside of the budget process within the meeting itself.
Great, thanks. I may want to go a second time, but I think I've hit the 4 minutes. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
A little better than that, but you're not going a second time. So no seeing no other speakers, I'll call the question. Oh, Councilor McCurry, I see your hand just come up.
Chair, thank you through you to staff. Chris, do I understand correctly that if we introduce a notice of motion, it would be debated at estimates?
Through to the chair, once you introduce a notice of motion, it will come as a resolution to say committee of the whole planning and administration. From there, members of the committee will debate the resolution, make amendments to it. Once it gets ratified by council, unless it's deemed urgent, it will be referred to the estimates process for consideration of the budget to be included in staff's work plans, as Brian suggested.
So is that only in the case where there's a budgetary impact?
That's for all resolutions that are not deemed urgent by the mover and the seconder.
Okay, and it's the word urgent defined somewhere.
Yes, it's defined in the procedural bylaw, something that requires immediate action. So an example of that would be, we just recently had a resolution to deem an event municipally significant for somebody to get an alcohol permit. So those are the types of resolutions that members of the committee may waive the rules to deem an urgent, because odds are by that time the event would be over.
Okay, I understand. So notices of motion will mostly become quite urgent.
Through the chair, that's up to the committee to determine.
Correct, yeah, but the mover and seconder will no doubt then have to justify moving on something immediately.
Through the chair, that's correct. And the committee will have to vote on that, and it will require 2/3.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McCurry. Councilor Sless, you have the floor, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a little confused, maybe through you to the clerk. Chris, if there's not a budgetary impact, I'm not sure. So when we get to estimates, then we're going to have a whole probably evening of discussing resolutions that have been approved that have no financial impact on the budget. Is that what we're setting up?
Well, I think I'll take that, Mr. Chair. Brian Hutchings, CEO. So I think what we're setting up, Councillor, is if there are financial impacts, yes, they'll be incorporated in somebody's budget, one of the operating manager's budgets, and it'll be highlighted that it is from a notice of motion in the budgets. If it doesn't have almost everything we do, it doesn't have dollars where we're spending, it has resource, it has people resource, and they can identify that they put those people resource in place to do whatever service you're asking in addition on that NOM. So it would be identified in the work plan. It would not be a separate item. It would just be identified in a line object in the work plan that NOM has been dealt with through either a resource or assigning staff to it or assigning dollars to it.
Okay, so in other words, I guess during the operating year, we could be inflating a budget that's coming up that in subsequent years. Am I understanding that correctly? If it gets approval during the committee process and then approved by council, does that mean it's approved, or does it get debated again at estimates?
I think there's an old quote saying promises of today are taxes of tomorrow. So the short answer is yes, it would go into next year's budget and would be debated. It's not probably, as you know, budget probably not piece by piece, but it could be debated as how it fits in the overall tax rate to the citizens at that time. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Further questions? Just a question of clarification. And so if council brings forward a resolution, let's say a stop sign, that has a budgetary impact, that would have to wait till next year's budget discussions, unless the council deemed it emergency.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Even if council said that the funding comes from the council's priority, it doesn't have any impact on the finances, it still has some staff impact.
So currently the changes that we're proposing, anything that's not deemed urgent will go to the estimates process. In addition, anything that does not fall within prescribed policies that the municipality has adopted, council priorities, strategic vision, it could also be determined by the chair within order or not in order. So if, let's say, a decision comes forward that waives a certain policy, then at that point in time, the chair could also make that determination.
Okay, thank you. Further question? Counselor Hunt.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, to Chris, are we setting ourselves up for a tsunami of notices of motion that are going to happen just prior to estimates?
Through the chair, I don't think it's going to change the notice of motion process in terms of we will get a lot more notice of motion. We do get a lot more notice of motion prior to an election year, but not towards the budget cycle. If you look at the stats that we provided, there's around 37 notice of motion that have been submitted this year, and we're on track to meet the 70 that we did last year. So I don't think it's going to change the volume of notice of motion that we bring forward.
Okay, so I guess I'm thinking in terms of anything that you're thinking of that you need to get in order for estimates. You don't want to wait another whole year. I'm thinking that's where the volume may come from, because you want to get them in advance of estimates for the following year. I'm thinking out loud, but I just don't want to see an agenda that has 25 notices of motion or resolutions on it, because everybody's trying to get their notice of motion or resolution put forward so that it goes to the estimates committee at the end of, or at the beginning of the following year.
If I can answer that, Chris, again, through Mr. Chair, Brian Hutchings. I think that's a great observation, Councillor. We'll see. Normally they flow through quite evenly throughout the year, but yeah, people are trying to get it done before then. We could see that. I want to talk about the genesis of this, if I can, to councillors. In June, we seem to have May and June, we seem to have a rash of notice of motions, and I was approached by 3 or actually 4 councillors saying, Brian, you need to do something and try to manage this somehow, because we're all running around, staff are running around doing notice of motions and changing work plans and everything else. And so this is our effort to see if this is a better way to manage the notice of motions and workflow for staff, because it's not about us sitting here, it's about the staff actually delivering the work and being changed direction on a day-to-day basis or month-to-month basis based on the notice of motion. So we may see an influx before estimates. We may not, based on what people need throughout the year.
Sorry, quickly, one last question, and either to through the chair to Chris or perhaps to Joelle. What's this look like for multi-year budgeting?
Through the chair to Councillor Hunt. Yep, that is a good question as well. a very good observation. Certainly there's opportunities throughout each annual update process to make amendments to the multi-year budget. So even though we're approving a multi-year budget in the first year, there is a legislated requirement as well to bring back updates. So any of these notices of motion that would come forward in years 2, 3, and 4 of that multi-year budget process would come through that annual update reporting as well for confirmation and inclusion in the budgets going forward.
Okay, thanks to both of you.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Second time speakers or first time speakers? Mayor Davis, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and I agree that Councillor Hunt has made an astute observation. It could result in an influx. I mean, we can always amend it and change it. We often do that once we've had a chance to measure the impact of something that we do. Also, members, they do have the ability to bring forward amendments during a budget process as well. But I would say to staff, I mean, what I have found most frustrating about notices of motion is that, we'll get a notice of motion, a resolution, and it's on the floor. And, we don't have any background. Some of them, we don't have background information for the staff. So it's hard to determine whether it's something you want to support as a member of council. And also sometimes makes it difficult for the councillor that brings forward the resolution, because they don't have, the facts and an argument from staff to support their position. So my request through the chair to you, Mr. Clerk, is how do you deal with that? Let's say I see a resolution. I think it's got some good merit, but I really do want some more information from staff. How do you deal with that?
Through the chair, just to clarify, you're speaking of a scenario where this rule is implemented and you're interested in supporting the resolution, but would like to have more information when it gets to the estimates process?
That you want a report from staff?
Well, I would suggest that within the resolution itself, that going to be debated at the committee of the whole or at council, just to add direction to have staff provide a report. And
right, so you could add a motion to defer seeking a staff report in the interim.
So you could either ask staff to provide a memo for the next council meeting.
Right.
And it's not uncommon for the estimates process to have staff reports embedded within the budget. And we've done that in the past. And so when that item gets referred to the estimates process, it would have that report attached to it.
Right. And so for those municipalities, Mr. Clerk, that don't usually use resolutions, but they use a request for a report, how does that work in those municipalities?
Through the chair, in those municipalities, there's a bit of a mixed bag there. You have municipalities that have the report mechanism. You have the municipalities that have reports and the notice of motion process. Essentially, the municipalities that have reports, they ask staff to provide a report on a certain topic. They vote on it, and then staff comes back and brings forward that report.
Right. You can do that on our current system. You just bring a resolution asking for a staff report.
That's correct. Both, there's merits to both. Last year we had 70 notice of motion. There's the potential where we have 70 reports that are written by staff.
Right. Okay. Mr. Chair, I can support this. I think it's, as I said earlier, we're trying to draw the proper balance between the ability of councillors to bring resolutions and to deal with those that are time urgent, but at the same time not unduly disrupting the business of the city or bending it or warping it. So I can support this. I think it's worth seeing what the impact will be of these measures, and hopefully what it gives us is a better system that achieves a better degree of balance between the two competing interests.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Seeing no further speakers, I'll call the question.
Thank you. Notice of motion deadline update carried on a recorded vote of 9-1. All those councillors voting in favor are Councillor Sullivan / Martin, Van Tilburg, Samwell, Hunt, McCurry, Caputo, and Mayor Davis. All those voting against are Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you. That brings us forward to resolutions, and we only have one resolution on the agenda tonight. Mayor Davis, please read your resolution and state your seconder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm bringing forward this resolution, the title of which is Designation of Net Proceeds of 2023 Mayor's Gala. Councillor Sullivan has graciously agreed to support this as a seconder, so I'll just read it. Whereas the Corporation City of Brantford holds a charity event known as the Mayor's Gala, and whereas the 15th Annual Mayor's Gala will be held on November the 4th, 2023, and whereas the net proceeds from previous Mayor Galas have been provided to local not-for-profit organizations which are deemed to be worthy causes, and whereas Nova Vita Domestic Violence Prevention Services, Nova Vita, is a not-for-profit organization that provides trauma-informed emergency shelter, outreach support, and counseling services to individuals and families experiencing abuse, as well as counseling for individuals who have caused harm in their relationships in our community. And whereas Nova Vita strives to end interpersonal violence and abuse by supporting individuals and families who've experienced domestic violence, intimate partner violence, gender-based violence through the provision of crisis intervention, emergency shelter, transitional support, children's programs, counseling, and by fostering accountability for those who harm through intervention, counseling, public education, and systemic advocacy. And whereas Nova Vita has provided these critical services and programs to the City of Brantford for 40 years, And whereas the city council supports local programs and investments that would serve the betterment of the community for years to come, now therefore be it resolved that the council, the corporation of the city of Brantford hereby designate the net proceeds of the 2023 Mayor's Gala to be provided to Nova Vita to support in the delivery of programs and services for women, children, men, and gender diverse people based on a trauma-informed approach to addressing domestic violence, intimate partner violence, and gender-based violence within our community. I'm speaking to it, Mr. Chair. Our tradition, our practice, and I think it's required by bylaw that we generally do have every year a Mayor's Gala. And the proceeds from that, which can be anywhere from $50,000 to $80,000 depending on how successful it is, we always designate that, and council designates it at the mayor's request to a particular charity. And it's been some time, I think, since Nova Vita has been the charity recipient for Mayor's Gala. And I thought it was appropriate, especially since we had a tour. Recall that members of council, we were offered a tour of Nova Vita. It was about 2 months ago. And I think we, as a result of that, all came to have a better understanding of the importance of Nova Vita in our community, and in particular for those who are suffering from abuse in their family relationships. And so I think it's a great organization. They certainly do need the assistance. I think we saw on our tour there are various programs they'd like to expand that hopefully this will help. And I'd ask that you support the resolution and hope as many of you as possible can come to the gala. I realize some people don't do galas or don't like galas, that's fine, but some do, and I'm hoping it'll be a great success, all of which will be to the benefit of Nova Vita.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do you have any information on when the gala is?
Yes, it is November the 4th.
And tickets can be bought and where?
Tickets are not yet available for sale, but they will be shortly. And they can be through the mayor's office. And of course, we'll do the appropriate posts, website, Facebook as to how people can purchase tickets.
Thank you.
Right now, if they're interested in attending, they can certainly email office of the mayor at brantford.ca, indicate who they are and that they're interested in attending and how many tickets they'd like. And we'll certainly add them to the list.
Because they should know there's a limited number of tickets for the amount of availability for the location.
Correct, there is. This year, we're going to be having it at the Hampton Inn because we haven't done it there before. And it probably is one of the largest capacity facilities in Brantford. And so we're going to try it there and see how it works.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Further speakers to this? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. Sorry, Councillor Hunt, I didn't see your hand up. Sorry.
Sorry, I just through the chair to staff. Yes, is it possible for us to get a listing of prior recipients of the proceeds of the Mayor's Gala?
We can provide that, yes, through my office. Sasha would have that list, yes.
Okay, and then one other question: is there an actual application process for charities to be considered as recipients, or is that just a?
No, okay.
No, there has not been at this point. Okay. Further questions? Seeing none? Okay, call the question.
Thank you. Designation of net proceeds of the 2023 Mayor's Gala carried unanimously on a recorded vote of 10-0. All those councillors voting in favor are Sullivan, Sless, Martin, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, Samwell, Hunt, McCreary, Caputo, and Mayor Davis.
Okay, there are no notices of motions tonight, maybe not for a while. Please note that the notice of motion deadline for council agenda is next Thursday at 9 a.m. So we are adjourned.